Hey, Justin, thank you for joining me on Wholesome Crypto podcast today. I appreciate you coming out and taking that time out for us to hang out and talk.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too, for sure. And you've done so much right in the crypto industry. I know you're working on GridPlus, Lattice, and there's a lot of exciting things happening with that. But before we get into all that stuff, I want to learn more about you and what you're doing and how you got into the crypto space. So tell me a little bit about yourself and what were you doing before you even heard about Bitcoin?
Let's see. Prior to hearing about Bitcoin, I was still probably a student. I was aware of it very early on, but the way I initially got pulled into crypto was very unceremonious. It wasn't a great origin story. It was just that based on the timing, the early 2010s, I was on a lot of torrent sites.
Nice.
I'm just an obsessive music
LimeWire
collector
and all that stuff.
and yeah, and so why did I have to buy Bitcoin originally? It was like, oh, well, that's how they accepted donations for server bills.
Wow, what year was that?
It was like 2014.
Oh, wow.
But I wasn't like stockpiling Bitcoin back then. It was something I did, and it was on my radar. And yeah, I think it's right around the right time frame. But again, at the beginning, it wasn't something that I was fully enamored of. I loved the original idea of Bitcoin because I think that community felt very different to me at the time. It was sort of like a techno-utopian, exciting, fun, laid-back thing, a cool experiment. I was never really drawn to the political side of that particular ecosystem. But for me, it was just like, wow, this is fascinating and fun. But I didn't get that into it. I wasn't stockpiling Bitcoin.
So you were definitely so would you call yourself like a tech enthusiast back in the day? Were you always interested in computers and like what's going on the internet? Was that like your domain where you lived back in the day?
Yeah. I think it's sort of, it coincides with my generation in particular. So it's like born in the mid 80s. And so I grew up with the first kind of wave of like computers at home being a normalized thing, people getting Nintendo when they were young. And so tech was just sort of a part of the fabric of my life in a way that I don't think other generations had. And I was also there for the earlier days of the internet as well, which was also, I guess, before it was about everybody yelling at each other online. It was also sort of this kind of techno-utopian, like exciting thing that was just thrilling to be part of and experiment with.
I think that's the best part about the internet and the worst, but the best part is like you can meet a lot of people, especially like-minded people, on forums, like on IRC chats. Back in the day, IRC, now it's all Discord. But yeah, you get a huge community and it's amazing what people together can accomplish, especially something like now, which is Bitcoin and Ethereum, and everything's accomplished digitally, everything is remote, and it's exciting stuff.
For me, why was tech always really important to me? I think also I grew up in kind of more rural Massachusetts. Okay. So, when you're younger and you're in a smaller place, technology is a more exciting window to the world. And, you mentioned being able to find like-minded people with similar interests. I think a lot of, very young people today that have grown up with that take that for granted. But I think just feeling that shift, it may make it more personally meaningful to me, or maybe people of my age. That like you went from being kind of like a lone wolf with a weird interest to all of a sudden you can find a like-minded community of people that you love engaging with. So that's it's a special thing.
And but your first time hearing Bitcoin was just, I guess, through forums. It wasn't even or seeing donation addresses. But did you have like a friend who was trying to convince you, hey, Justin, you have to get into this Bitcoin stuff? It's the craziest thing ever.
So not really.
Were you that friend?
Cryptography and the cypherpunks were on my radar like in the late 90s already, because I was reading like Wired and Mondo 2000 and these older magazines that were focused on cryptography as a personal freedom initiative, not in terms of financial freedom. But at that time in the late 90s, there was a lot of discussion of strong cryptography being deemed a munition by the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
government. And so I remember someone getting the public key string like tattooed on their arm, and that was being featured
Oh, wow.
in Wired because he wanted to just travel with that across borders, saying that this is something that is a beneficial technology for everyone. It should not be treated in this fashion, and we should all have access to these tools. So I had that kind of context originally with like cryptography using PGP early on. But when I first got into Bitcoin, no, I didn't think of it as an investment thing. I thought of it as kind of just like as in an abstract way, as a fun and interesting thing. And I think maybe my first connections, reading a little bit more, was like the Bitcoin Talk forums and like Reddit.
Yeah.
As it started to pick up there. But even then, Reddit's crypto communities didn't start getting bigger till like
Yeah.
2015,
I
2016.
think Ethereum definitely exploded that scene just because of all the ICOs that came out and everyone's creating a subreddit for their ICO. But yeah, Bitcoin Talk Forum was the place to go. That's where everyone released their new coin or token, and that was a cool forum to be on. It's still active today.
Kind of is. It's kind of like, yeah. It's not something I've looked at for a long time and got value out of. But yeah, it was right around, it was 2016, where I'd heard about Ethereum before in passing, and I hadn't really considered it that deeply. And it was Reddit, I think, where I really started going down the rabbit hole on Ethereum. And at that time, it was very small. There was the old ETH Trader subreddit. I think it was like 5 to 10,000 people, and everyone was saying Ethereum was dead because of the DAO hard fork. And I just got more and more enamored with it, and I kind of felt like a crazy person because I was like, this is so exciting. There's so many things that can be done. Why is no one else fired up about
this? I still feel
this?
like a crazy person sometimes. I'm like, Ethereum's great, and people are looking at me like, what's Ethereum? What are you talking about?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think anyone who's really into crypto knows you can kind of see someone's gaze when you go too deep into the weeds, and like they sort of start like drifting to like, yeah, okay, cool, but anyways.
Exactly, that's the thing. Like that's the problem with like-minded community, is that we're all in it together, thinking the same way and seeing the same vision. But when you go back out into the mainstream world, it's kind of like, oh yeah, not everyone sees this yet. How do I help?
I think, yeah, that's true of even people who identify themselves as being deeply into crypto. I guess a little background. So with my job, I work for a hardware wallet manufacturer that's focused on Ethereum in particular and smart contract chains. And so, I think everyone likes to posture on social media that they're deep tech experts. But in reality, most people who say they're really into crypto are trading on centralized exchanges, and they might be nervous about asking for a little hand holding. But most people out there need it. Like, you see this sort of very small subset of the crypto community who is dog fooding everything, trying every new thing that comes out. And still, most people are kind of at the point where you probably were years ago, where like, I remember the first time I sent money off of a centralized exchange. And I think like I was double checking the receipt address like over and over again. My palms were sweating. I was so terrified I was going to do something wrong. And now it's signing is like a daily thing. But it felt very exotic doing that, or trading on Ether Delta for the first time. I thought I was doing just
that was a
weird.
DEXs were a really big thing back in the day, and it's just, I don't know, they kind of just like fell off, and DeFi just totally took over.
Well, yeah, I mean, but now it's something we take for granted. We've got Uniswap and Balancer and all the aggregators, so people just, it's like something that was sort of radical initially that now it just works.
So at this point, you were working as a hardware wallet manufacturer, but before you got into that, what were you doing as your career path?
In my early 20s, I had a very meandering path. I started out originally as a performing arts student, and I was studying music and music production, which I'm, as far as career path. It was not the most solid coming into the digital age. And so I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I bounced around. I did like computer science for a semester and philosophy. Where I ended up landing was the antithesis of all of this. I was like, okay, I've got to do the most practical thing possible. So I got into accounting and finance. And then I went on to do my MBA.
Gotcha.
And then I worked in a very niche, boring area for a while. I did hedge fund and private equity tax analysis at JP Morgan and State Street.
Okay.
And some people love that. For me, it kept the lights on, and I was never particularly thrilled about
Next day. Yeah.
tax as a pursuit. Yeah. And so somewhere around 2016, early 2017, as like we're like, holy cow, Ether is going to hit $10 again. I think I spent more time in the office looking at Etherscan.
Yep.
And people were asking me about it, and I even remember like we had internal conferences. State Street was super into their blockchain proof of concepts early on. They didn't do much that had traction initially. I remember going to this internal conference and had these cheesy giant cardboard cutouts and just said blockchain.
Really? Wow.
It was like blocks flying through space. And at the time I was like, this is all right. This is a real thing. It's not just my weird Reddit communities, and like
people are seeing it.
I think other people who are considering it deeply are seeing it too. So that was part of the signal to start thinking about making the jump.
Then, so you're seeing, but then, what convinced you to like take the jump? What was the point of going from a tax analyst to becoming part of GridPlus?
Well, couple things. I started following GridPlus even before the project really started in like spring of 2017, when I was streaming videos from a crypto conference hosted by Rice University.
Okay.
And so Alex Miller, one of the co-founders of GridPlus, spoke, and he was talking about ideas that would lead to the genesis of GridPlus, which was distributed energy meshes, where they would have like they worked on this proof of concept that's still live in Brooklyn, called the Brooklyn Microgrid, in conjunction with LO3 Energy when Alex was at Consensus. And what that did was just basically a local transactional grid where energy is shared directly peer-to-peer. For regulatory reasons, that's not something that can happen at scale in the US or most of the Western world. But he is talking about creating greater efficiency with the infrastructure we have now using batteries. It just resonated with me tremendously as like a serious application beyond speculation, where the technology it made sense for this purpose. And Joe Lubin talked at that one too, and he talked about, I don't know if his perspective has shifted over the years, but another theme that resonated with me is that Ethereum, maybe 10, 20 years out, was going to be infrastructure for the machine to machine economy. It's like the rails on which value is transferred. And automatically done between all these different systems, and will kind of be an internet backbone that we take for granted. So these things really resonate with me, and I started following the GridPlus team like obsessively since day one. And I was like that obnoxious community guy. I just started answering questions on there. They had a Slack and a Telegram, and I was like the guy. I was always on and answering questions. And eventually, when I was ready to make the jump, I started talking to our old CEO, Mark D'Agostino, who was also at Consensus prior, and he was helping me try and land my first role in the space. And then I eventually thought, if I'm going to work with anybody, I want to work with you guys. So I pitched him and the team, and they brought me on board.
That's awesome.
I've been there since.
That's exactly how I've done some work in the past for crypto. That's how you have to do it, is just become that person in the chat forums and the group chats, wherever you can. Just be as active as possible and get recognized for what you're doing, because right now the only value you have is to contribute information, is to share and just help out the community members, and you'll get recognized for doing good work. So all that hard work does go noticed, and it can land you a full career in a crypto industry.
Yeah. And a lot of people, when you get started, you have this sort of sense that there's a distinction between the end users and the people who are, the big
Hmm.
brains making all of this a reality. So I was even, I mentioned ETH Trader in 2016. I was terrified to
Yeah.
post on our Ethereum. It's like, oh, that's where all the smart guys are, and I'm not entirely sure I know what's going on with half the discussion. But it's really just a matter of jumping in. It's a collaborative thing that is more of a meritocracy than any other system out there. Like if you jump in and you do something useful, you're going to find your niche because it feels like everyone is shorthanded right now with aspirations beyond their
Yeah.
bandwidth. So
And with all the projects coming out, there's always a flavor for someone to be part of something they're interested in.
yeah.
So now that you're a part of GridPlus, you're the marketing and business development lead there. How did it go from you doing energy into going into focusing on wallets, hardware wallets?
So the two ideas always went hand in hand. And the reason for this is that to facilitate the energy use case, you needed to have a new kind of hardware wallet, something that was flexible, that was programmable, and could do automated permission transactions. And the team had always viewed this as sort of being like a Trojan horse for mainstream adoption of
Hmm.
cryptocurrency, a physical, intuitive device that you could use that had real world applications. And if the idea was that people could just save money on their energy bills and have like the best hardware wallet possible on their desk in their home in some capacity, they're going to explore other opportunities with it and get more and more into it. Really, what stuck though over time, we realized that our passion, our expertise, and everything was really in the hardware, cryptocurrency, and privacy side. Um, we had run an energy subsidiary for a couple of years, and it did moderately well, but I think it was actually kind of a blessing that the Texas deregulated energy market basically imploded this
Yeah.
February due to an ice storm and then just the market calling like two-thirds of the participants. We actually fared much better due to our preparation than most retail electricity providers. Um,
Nice.
but yeah, the market was just basically annihilated, and there's going to be, I think, a no regulatory appetite for what we were trying to accomplish by merging these two elements of the
Hmm.
business. So um, we're a much leaner organization focused on what works, and it's been like that. We really were moving in that direction since, yeah, like for the past couple of years, anyways. So when we launched our product to retail in December of last year, it was entirely about just the wallet. And that was a kind of a key consideration too. Like when we first set out, we wanted to have this flexible device that would also be used for ETH staking. At the
Yeah.
time, they wrote about this in 2017, so they were calling it Casper staking at the time, and specs evolved
I remember that. Yeah. I
quite a
actually
bit
forgot until
since.
you just told me about that. I'm like, oh yeah, Casper. I forgot about that. That just nothing came out of that.
Yeah, so well, it just evolved
Yeah.
quite a bit, and now the spec is pretty much solidified as we get ready for the merge. Although there's still lot more to be done after we go through that this coming year.
Yeah. And then let's see. So you're here and working on creating the hardware wallet. And it's a pretty unique method because what we're used to right now is like Ledger and Trezor, like just a simple device where you click on a few buttons to get things going. But you have like almost like a kiosk point of sale system, what it looks like for, your everyday activity. Um, what was the inspiration for that design?
Pretty much every one of the co-founders having a background focused on Ethereum in the early
Hmm.
days, um, because the designs and the user experience for like the USB thumbstick style hardware wallets, when those were conceived, all people ever did with crypto was trade on centralized
Yep.
exchanges and send to cold storage and back, or maybe send to each other. So you never had to do anything more than verify the recipient
Hmm.
address. And they had a benefit by having your keys stored offline, which was more secure, but they were kind of designed for a different era of crypto. And what we realized was that the two key properties of a hardware wallet are um, securing your keys themselves. We did a lot of different things on that to kind of remedy concerns we found when we did teardowns in 2017 on popular products. You could do seed extraction and stuff when you had physical access. And then the other thing is actually being able to know precisely what you're signing, which is much more critical for a smart contract chain.
Yep.
So,
especially with all of the scams going on, because sometimes you can log on to a bad website or use MetaMask and you're just signing away everything in your wallet without even recognizing, because if you're new to it, it's just like, okay, sign, approve. Here's my gas fees and make it work. And I've had
those USB wallets are great for Bitcoin and they are perfect for that. But for Ethereum, if you're not verifying what you're signing on that little screen and it's all hexadecimal and basically everyone just YOLO signs, it's sort of like having 10 locks on your door, but you just let everyone in who knocks. And this actually like gives you the tool to verify what you're signing, that you're looking at the right contract, that you're doing the right thing, whether it's transferring or adding liquidity to a pool. Like, you should have the ability to actually verify what you're signing on a device that you can trust. And that's the distinction. And I think there's going to be more of a need for that. And I hope if we move the needle enough that we will be inspiring the other major manufacturers, or at least ones who are focused on more than Bitcoin, to kind of do something with a similar approach, which will be to the benefit of all users. That competition will be great because the hardware, not just the hardware wallet space, but the wallet space in general, I'm seeing a lot of new teams spin up, and I think that will be good for everybody.
Yeah, I've seen a few hardware wallets popping up now. I think because of what you're saying, trying to solve that problem with signing so many different transactions in the Ethereum space, and especially with NFTs going on and people signing contracts and having your own .eth address and ENS domains. There's just so many different platforms and use cases for Ethereum. You kind of do need a system that can better, represent what's going on in front of you, just so you know what you're doing. And
NFTs are actually a really interesting aspect of all of this. Something that we didn't anticipate being so big when we started, but actually it's been like a key area for us. It's because NFTs attracted all these people who were interested in the application layer and weren't necessarily obsessive with the underlying blockchains. So this is like a whole new cohort of people getting into the space. And the other thing about NFTs is that they require self-custody.
Yep.
There's no simple exchange interface now, and I'm sure this will change over time, where you could custody all your NFTs and trade in a non-custodial way. So you had all these people who were less familiar with the technology jumping right into the deep end out of necessity. So that group has been, I think, like more receptive to what we're doing. It's more intuitive for them because they're just sort of leapfrogging old preconceptions and better understand the value of this because they have to manage their own collections and curate them.
And I guess brings a lot of questions. Like, what's a difficult challenge that you have now trying to get either the community online or people around you trying to learn and accept like why you need a hardware wallet versus just MetaMask or taking the easy route of just signing away transactions? Like, what's your current challenge of educating?
You took the key word out of my mouth, which is education. Unfortunately, I think it took a lot of it took the proliferation of scams directly targeting the NFT community for people to get more aware that they need to take an active role in securing their assets. And self-custody is scary, when you're doing that. There's no one you can just call and get a chargeback
FDIC
on
insured.
what you sent. Yeah, exactly. And so education, I think, remains the biggest problem with blockchain today. I think people are more sophisticated now, and some of these concepts are becoming more intuitive to people who've just stuck around for a bit. But the basics still require time to get your head around. And even like wallet is a misnomer because people think, all right, I'm storing my assets in this box. But no, you're storing keys, and those keys are the rights to all your assets and moving and doing what you want with them. Um, so some of the early nomenclature is not super helpful, and I also think the space is a little intimidating sometimes. So people feel disinclined to ask basic questions because they don't want to be labeled a noob. And people need to be comfortable with that because
Well,
when you're
people
putting
like
something valuable
yeah,
at
and people
risk,
like us need to be like, well, we are, but the whole community as a whole needs to be more accepting of newcomers, because if you want something to become mainstream, you kind of have to be nice to people who are trying to learn. Otherwise, they're going to be afraid or not inclined to ask questions and kind of just go back to the way things were that they know and understand. It's definitely a
yeah.
patience game.
And I think we're all we could all do a better job in going that like last mile to make this more friendly because it's still tricky. Um, so MetaMask now is such a popular tool. I think they have it's either 15 or 16 million monthly average
Wow.
users. It's massive, um, but there's so much learning that goes with it that is intimidating to someone who's only used Coinbase or something
Yeah.
prior. And managing your own private keys and taking on that responsibility is something that I think most people would like a lot more handholding with. Um, and these experiences should be streamlined. So you see, great companies like them do more to try and educate people to improve the user experience. My crypto is a great one that is always providing people security
Mhm.
tips or occasionally yelling security tips at people on Twitter. But there needs to be more of that, and there needs to be resources that people know is a reliable go-to because um, there's like the cliche about trying to keep up with crypto news is like trying to drink from a fire hose.
Yeah, it is
Uh,
for me too right now.
yeah, yeah,
And that's like yeah, the kind of good thing about centralized entities is that they understand their main market is newcomers and beginners, and they take security as pretty seriously. And, they take the ownership of keeping your funds secure. Like Coinbase, they might be a centralized exchange, but if I have some funds on there, I'm not going to, I'll sleep at night just fine. It's not like I'm keeping my funds on MetaMask where I don't feel safe keeping any funds there. So it's like definitely a game where you have to know, one, keeping yourself safe in the digital world, not make sure you don't get hacked, make sure you don't go on any scam sites. And, the more that we can help people understand how their funds are stored, where it's stored, and the different, holes that can be accessed by hackers, is you got to keep a watch out for that.
yeah. And beyond education too, the people that are providing tools to everyone, I think they have to do more to meet new users where they are already
Mm-hmm.
and maybe frame things in terms of familiar concepts. Um, so, talking about things in terms of like how they manage their bank accounts and whatever else. And like, because yeah, you can focus on education from the ground up with totally new concepts. Um, but the user experience for crypto, um,
Yeah.
I think we're already having enough broad exposure that there are a lot of people that, you know, uh, are a little befuddled by what they're trying to get into, and it's not easy to dig into yet. As much as once you're in the space for a while, a lot of this feels intuitive. But I think people forget that because the longer you're in the space, the more you focus on the
Yeah.
minutia or more exotic things going on, and you forget that everyone else is just trying to get their initial toehold.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I've been realizing too. Even happens to myself. Um, so yeah, you're working on such a massive, awesome, innovative product, and you're on. I see you on the Discord channel all the time. You're always active, talking, contributing. You also have a family at home. What do you do to keep yourself, sane and not so overwhelmed, and kind of what's your method of relaxation? Like, what are your hobbies to also just think outside of crypto?
Um, that is an ongoing struggle. So yeah, I have a family. I'm married. I have 2 young kids. I have a 5-year-old son and a 1.5-year-old daughter.
Congratulations.
Um, Thanks. Yeah, they're great 99% of the time, and yeah, I mean they have to come before everything else. But um, this was made, I think every family can kind of identify with the fact that it's been so much trickier even these past 2 years of the pandemic because you didn't have daycare and all these other things. So it's been a struggle juggling all of it. Um, and as we get really busy now, which is a good problem to have because we're getting our initial traction. We're happy with how things are going. That gets even harder to balance. So I end up either working at night, like time with my kids from the end of the workday till like their bedtime is like it's sacrosanct. I don't pick up my phone. I leave my phone in the other room, so I'm not even
Yep.
tempted. Because otherwise I'll be like, oh, I'm just gonna do this one thing.
It's never just one thing. It's
You know,
just
and it always keeps going. So yeah, I know what I should do to better manage my time, but um, really for me, and I guess it's different for everybody. The best thing is organization because you can stay busy 24/7 in this space and get nothing done. Um,
yep.
and so for me, I write out my schedule for the week, like what I want to accomplish to keep myself honest. Again, going with the cliches, what gets measured gets
Yep.
managed. So I write out my daily itinerary, aside from my calendar and like a note tool, and try to keep to a schedule. But I know there's so much more I should be doing. I should be exercising daily, get those endorphins and sleep
It's
better.
tough. It's
Um,
tough. I mean, even like I try to at least, and I try to go to bed around like 10 at night, just so I can wake up early around 6 or 7, and that's like my quiet time where I don't look at the phone, I don't look at the computer. It's nice and quiet outside. I don't have like that rush to get things going. It's like my meditation hour where I just kind of focus on getting myself ready for the day.
So that's actually it's a pro and a con for me. The late nights are, when everyone's asleep, that's like
Grind.
my time and I can either work and turn off notifications and, like no one has the expectation I'll reply to them immediately. Or I do something to relax. For a while it was like, you know, if you get stressed, I ended up like binging on Netflix like people are prone to
Yep.
do. That kind of stopped working after a while and I guess actually one of the best things for me is a new vice, which is not necessarily ideal. It's not meditation or
Okay.
running, but I got my wife got an Oculus, or now it's a Meta Quest
Oh,
2, and she wanted to play Beat
yeah, yeah.
Saber, and I kind of commandeered it. She still loves it, but like for me, VR was like this really immersive thing where I didn't focus on anything else. And so for me, getting back into video games, which I hadn't done for a long time, that was something that because it was an active process, I tuned everything else out and it actually really relaxed me. So I've been super into
That's
that
so funny.
lately.
My brother just got the Oculus Quest 2 also. Yeah, we were playing Beat Saber and kind of just, it's so immersive and such a fun game. I didn't think it'd be so fun, but it is. I played Guitar Hero as a kid for like the Wii and Xbox.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like even though I'm not like a Facebook fan, but like it's a fun game. It's a fun device and it's a great way to really immerse yourself outside the world. But it can easily become addicting. So it's something I have to limit myself with. All right,
Yeah.
just put it down.
Yeah. I usually have my fill like within an hour
Yeah.
or so, but yeah, I'm like some people they get into it for a little while and they enjoy the novelty of it. But I'm one of the people that stuck with it despite the Facebook connection. I'm not a Facebook fan on any level. But VR was something. Again, you talk about being tech oriented when you're younger. I was into like cyberpunk
Yeah.
fiction and all of that, and VR was one of these concepts that loomed big. And then when you actually looked at anything, it was garbage for years. And this is sort of like the first time I tried something out. I was like, okay, this is actually fun and immersive now. Like it can still get way better. It should get way
Yeah.
better before I think it gets bigger. But it's pretty damn cool right now. So I'm having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. And it's like another thing I wanted to ask is like, you're always in this type of industry in like the latest tech scene, but did you ever imagine yourself being in such a the beginning era of a new industry, a new generation of the internet. Did you think that's going to be your role? Was that kind of like your passion? I want to start a revolution with tech.
It's like anything else. There's a direction setting, but like it's what you do every day that makes
Mm-hmm.
you. And this sort of just naturally became what I did every day out of obsession. And I got to the point where I think I was distracted at work and more focused on what was going on with
Yep.
crypto and trying to, read every new Reddit message and everything, every morning on the train into work. And then it sort of took over. And so when I got to the point where still anxious about making the leap, so I did it, and when the crypto focus was sort of waning a little bit, but I always been, not always, but for the past 4 or 5 years, I've been pretty confident about the trajectory of this technology, or at least some iteration of it. So even though I was anxious at that time, like it made sense at that point because I wanted to just merge what I was already doing um, with my actual career path.
Yeah. And, focusing so much on crypto, and being in the industry for so long and watching it grow, what is your crypto pet peeve? You're seeing so much of the industry changing yearly almost. It's just so fast. Like, what is your crypto pet peeve and what you've been seeing so far?
I think it plays into social media, which is maybe more of a human nature problem than a crypto specific one. But all the gaslighting on Twitter, I see the voices of some of the smartest, most hardworking people get drowned out by the loudest, most obnoxious
Mm-hmm.
people, and people tend to focus on the controversy and trying to dunk on other people with one-liners. And again, if Twitter is people's portal to understanding this tech for the first time, it doesn't give a great first impression.
Yeah.
There's a lot of valuable information to be gleaned from that source, but we could do with some better communications channels for like more substantive discussion. It doesn't have to be technical, and better educational resources. Because just
Yeah.
the onboarding point for all this is janky. Like I get why a lot of people have a negative impression. Like if you just follow a few random big accounts on Twitter and you look at some of the outspoken people in this space, it looks ridiculous. But that is, I think, aside from the core value, like I think that's actually kind of part of the magic is that you can get those people involved in that. It's all about incentive structuring, right? So what is brilliant about the big blockchains and blockchain in general at the base layer is that it's kind of a machine that inputs human greed and like outputs a public good. That is kind of magical. Where like again, meeting people where they already are. If people are going to act in their own rational self-interest,
Yeah.
then set up the incentive structure in a way that you get a positive outcome from people doing what they're going to do anyways.
And that's what I always try to look for on Twitter is the people who are giving those threads of explaining to me how Ethereum works, how Ethereum layer 2 works, as ZK syncs work, and what GridPlus is doing, and really give me the details, because otherwise all I hear is this is a scam, this is a scam, all this other coin's going to become the next big pump and overtake market cap, and I'm like, none of this makes sense. Tell me which one actually is trying to do something in the world.
Yeah, my favorite people to follow, and I don't always go this route, but it's not necessarily the most technically gifted people, but it's the people who can take a complex concept and make it palatable, digestible for everybody. I think that is so valuable, and there's not enough of that. People who are sort of translating from blockchain nerd to their native language. In that sometimes there's a lot of very gifted technical people in this space who are so deep into the jargon that they don't effectively communicate the value of what they're doing to a broader audience. So I really feel that people who just kind of share their experiences, like you talk about getting involved initially, just I'd love when people, as they read something, as they try and parse it out themselves, they just share their synopsis or how they interpreted it. And I think that layer of discussion is has not been nurtured enough. Like sort of this collaborative, uplifting sharing of what you learn as you go, and not worrying about people judging you because you don't know
Yeah,
something.
exactly. Yes. Well, now that I have you some other questions to ask you from a coworker of yours. I think
Oh
you know
no!
this person, JT.
Oh no!
He's making fun of you that you're from the Boston area. So, is it true that your favorite restaurant is Red Lobster?
That is absolutely false. If you are from the
Which I
Northeast,
am.
you're not. Yeah, you're not going to Red Lobster. Lobster. First of all, tourists come to Boston and they want to go to an expensive restaurant and have lobster. For me, it's like a picnic table
Yep.
food because it's not. I don't eat it gracefully. It's a messy affair. So I want like a roll of paper towels and like seafood and beer is like an outdoor summer New England thing. So no, hell no to Red
All right,
Lobster.
JT, you have it. It's definitely a no. That's so funny. Yeah, your community is great and they're a lot of fun. I love hanging out in Discord and chatting around.
I want to give a shout out to JT also. So I mentioned getting into ETH Trader in 2016. He was one of those key people who was a regular guy and explained things as he understood them. And he was kind of instrumental in me getting a foothold on a lot of core concepts
Cool.
originally. So when we needed to have people helping with the education of our users, like I was just absolutely over the moon to get JT involved because he's great, he's accessible, he's friendly, he's a lot of fun. But like I wanted to emphasize this aspect of the community. He is someone who's always just been there because it was something he loved. It wasn't his main
Hmm.
job, and he's been doing it for years. So we're very lucky to have
Yeah,
him.
and yeah, I've chatted with him. He's a stellar dude, so fun to talk to, and yeah, I'm also glad you have him on board.
Hmm.
Um, so before we end this off, I do want to ask you my classic question. What made you smile the most recently? It could be anything non-crypto related, crypto related. It was, trying to bring the endorphins of, what gave you a grin.
Well, this is a corny old person
It's,
answer, I guess. But if I had to be totally honest, there's a lot of wonderful things in crypto that make me smile. But what centers me is my kids. Like my 1.5-year-old daughter is uh, just like being with her is like that's like a recentering
mhm.
thing, especially with how overly online I am and how plugged in I am. Like, it's a constant reminder of what's important.
That's
So,
amazing.
um, yeah. Um, and I wouldn't have thought this way when I was younger. I don't think I was ever like a super family oriented guy, but it changes people, and I'm very lucky.
That's like the thing too is like, both spend so much time online on the internet. It's really a different world. Like my mind definitely goes into a different world and it forgets everything around me. And then having something or like again like your daughter to help you stay in the realm of presence in the realm of reality or current reality, it's important. It's healthy for you, and I'm glad you are able to recognize that and able to appreciate it.
Yeah. I better if my son ever goes back and looks through any of my old interviews. Hey, you're very important too, but babies are just extra too. So yeah, I hope you can
He was
understand.
a baby once too, and that was the same thing you would say.
The same exact thing then.
We're all babies once.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Justin. I really appreciate your time. Let's excited for GridPlus to keep going. I'm excited to keep track of it, and I'm excited for you too.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. The time flew
Yeah,
by. It was just like a fun, relaxing conversation, and I hope we can speak more
awesome.
soon.
See you, everyone.
All right. Thank you.